A very warm welcome to you all. My name is Jessica Lancre-Frost, and I'm a policy officer at NAUC. It is my pleasure to be chairing today's event on breaking the mould of local councils. Firstly, I'd like to quickly run through a few housekeeping announcements, some of which are shown on screen. Do use the Q&A function throughout the event to put questions to our speakers, and the chat function to interact with your fellow delegates and to share any information or links. If you require any technical support, please do post in the chat, and my NAUC colleagues will try their best to help you. The closed captions feature, subtitles, can be accessed by all attendees at any time during today's event. And after the event, we will send the presentation slides used today, chat, and any other useful information. And we will also be inviting your feedback on the event, so please do look out for the feedback form, which should pop up on your screens following the conclusion of the webinar. Now, NAUC would like to thank its partners, Clear Councils Insurance, CCLA, and Bleshare Illuminations for their extensive support for our online events. The prevailing notion of retired, predominantly male, parish and town councillors persists, echoing the enduring image from the Vicar of Dibley era, despite ongoing national campaigns to challenge this perception. So this event will delve into major stakeholders' perspectives on this situation and explore strategies for local councils to attract a more diverse and useful pool of candidates for election or co-option. You'll gain insights into the shared challenges organisations face in a world where fewer people have the time to volunteer. You will also uncover the secrets of success for your council in attracting a broader, more diverse range of candidates willing to volunteer as local councillors against all odds. So, I'm thrilled to be joined today by a brilliant panel of speakers. Shawana Aaron, Chief Executive at Queen's Park Community Council, Simon Kay, Policy Director at Reform Think Tank, and Tamsin Hewitt, Leadership Advisor of the Local Government Association. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to you, Shawana. Over to you, Shawana.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Jessica, for the warm welcome. As Jessica said, I'm Shawana. I'm the Queen's Park Community Council's Chief Exec. So Queen's Park Community Council is London's first and still only community/parish council. At the last election, we had 3 of our 4 election zones were contested and resulted in a 50-50 gender split among our councillors. We also had 58% of our councillors who were representing ethnic minority communities, 66% were in work, and 33% under 40. So whilst we have had a few resignations and changes over the last couple of years, we still have a very diverse group of councillors having elected co-opted 4 women to the council, having lost 3 men and 1 woman. So, and we've also now have one of our youngest councillors who is just 29. In Queen's Park as a whole, we have an extremely diverse community. We have a large population of Irish, white, Black, Caribbean, Bangladeshi, and Arabic heritage people. Many of our community, specifically the white Irish and Black Caribbean, have been community members for like generations, up to 4 to 5 generations, which is very not common in London. In terms of location, we are also a diverse, kind of physically diverse location. We've got a very large conservation area made up of Victorian cottages. We've got a lot of, which actually the split of that is around 50% social housing and 50% private ownership. We also have 3 post-war estates, which were built to replace places destroyed during the Second World War, and a number of streets of Victorian and Edwardian townhouses. Economically, again, the community is very diverse. We have significant percent of our population who are economically inactive. With only 17% of our population economically active, and that's largely a result of having a significant older population, and also 57% of our community having registered having some form of disability. So for Queen's Park, diversity really is a necessity, because there's just so much diversity across our area in terms of the people, in terms of the space, in terms of what people are doing. So diversity is a necessity for us, but it's also a challenge, and it's also a strength. For us, it's a strength in that when you have such a diverse community, the needs are very wide, and we have to be able to be creative and innovative in the way that we're striving to develop and adapt our approaches, our projects, our services, to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our community. And sometimes this means that we have to do different things for different people. And then the challenge there is being able to communicate to the community why that different approach is necessary. And sometimes it means that we bring the different things together and deliver simultaneously a big project that meets just very different needs. And the outcomes of those sort of projects as well are really generally well received. I think diversity for us is also a strength because it enables us, like, it puts so many opportunities on our doorstep to fulfill our kind of remit, our purpose as a community council. There's so many opportunities for us to support the educational, social, cultural, economic development of our residents, because there's so many ideas coming to us through our residents, through our various community networks. And it just means that there's so many different spaces that we can position ourselves to really meet the needs of our community and fulfill our purpose as a community council. So diversity really just kind of stretches us as a council, stretches us as a community. But it also has its challenges. It means that we have to be on our toes a lot. We have to make sure that our communication channels are very clear, are very visible to the community. We always have to just kind of strive to stay connected with a community that is like, we've got people who are in work, people who aren't at work, people who are housebound. So there are just many different ways that we have to develop our communication channels, and mediums that we use, our engagement strategies, and different modes of connecting with different demographics within our community. And because we are a very small council, and we've got very limited staff capacity, and quite a lot of our councillors, as I've said, are in work, so we don't necessarily have that volunteer capacity on an everyday basis from our councillors. So it does bring that kind of challenge, but ultimately, as I said, it positions us in such an exciting place to do different things, try different approaches, meet the needs of our community in various ways, and fulfill our purposes. So it's a challenge, but the challenge is part of our necessity, a necessity for us. Yeah, and just really enables us to do what we do and do it well. So when we're thinking about kind of candidates, it's necessary again for us to be diverse so that we can really tap into the various demographics that make up our community. And so the way that we kind of attract diverse candidates is we kind of poach them from other organizations in our community that we work very closely with. And it's not a planned program of poaching, so to speak. It just kind of happens symbiotically because of the way that we work with various organizations in our community. It just enables us to reach a wide range and diversity of candidates, so that then we can kind of attract them to the council and what we do. So the way that this works for us in terms of how it practically works is, one of the things that we try to keep updated with is kind of like a map of our community. Who are the key players, the people who are just organizing events and programs just off of their own back, the community organizations, the informal groups that are working in the community. We try to keep and update a map of that as constantly as possible, and to meet with them very informally to understand what their needs and objectives are, and essentially provide ways that we can help them meet that need and objective. So it basically helps to kind of position the council in helping to facilitate what they're facilitating for the specific demographics of the community that they're working for. So whether that means promoting their things through our channels, collaborating on programs, um, encouraging them to kind of bring their concerns to the council through meetings, through working groups and steering groups, promoting our grant opportunities to them, or even other things like providing logistic support for them in terms of running their organizations. We've helped so many residents kind of set up structures as community interest companies, community interest organizations, and providing kind of that kind of support, so that we are essentially enabling them to meet the needs that they've identified in the community, and positioning ourselves, the council, as a body that does that enabling. And I really think that that helps to build foundational relationships between the community, and really just positions us as a conduit for other local organizations to meet their aims. And in so doing, also helps us to meet our aims. What I found with that is also transparency is really important in terms of when we're having these conversations with residents, with groups or whatever, being very clear about how the council works, what the structures are. And that means that we aren't over-promising and under-delivering, but it also means that they have an understanding of how they can make a difference in our council, whether through the working group, whether working collaboratively with us, or whether coming on board as a co-opted councillor or an elected councillor. They understand the processes, the limits, the boundaries of the way that we work, and can start to think about how they can position themselves within that structure to make the kind of change that they want to make in the community. And one of the things that we also try to do quite a lot is to celebrate the other organizations within our community. So we will celebrate what they're doing, we'll celebrate the people that are doing it. And again, that's really about building those foundational relationships, showing the community, individuals and organizations, that we value what they are doing, and like we want to be part of the community that they have, separate from us but also together with us. And then really when it comes to kind of elections, it's really about kind of like calling on those networks, because we've already developed the relationship with the organizational structures, but we've also developed the relationship with the residents within that network, because we've been collaborating on events, we've been working together across the years. So there's a good knowledge of the council, of what it does, of how people can get engaged. So then we call on those networks to kind of promote that. An election is coming up, there are opportunities to be a councillor. People already have an understanding of what the council does, how it works, and so it kind of sets that groundwork. And then we also do some work around kind of actively promoting that, like as wide as possible. We utilize our print systems. We have a newsletter that goes out to the entire community, our digital systems, social media. We go as wide as possible, promoting our opportunities. We use different mediums, different languages where necessary, to promote the opportunity that is coming to become a councillor within the community council. And we also set to like support the process. We understand that even though people might understand how a council works, they don't necessarily understand the process of election. It's not as easy I don't think it's easy for anybody necessarily, but it is a difficult process. There's also the kind of confidence building, I think, that's needed, where some people just they know how to do good work in the community. They know how to engage on an individual level. But when it comes to kind of selling themselves in hustings or something like that, that's a little bit more difficult. Or articulating what they want to bring in a written form is a little bit more difficult. So we kind of support that process in helping people to basically put their best foot forward. And then we uh kind of obviously avoiding the pre-election period, kind of promoting the candidates, promoting what they want to do across our community, again, using our various channels. And that's really just about ensuring that we get a good turnout for our elections, but also that the people who are brought in to the council to be decision makers for the community, that the things that they've like committed to doing, or the ways that they're committed to work with the community, to work with the council, really meets the needs that as identified by a community beyond their network. So yeah, I think in summary, diversity for us is just it's a necessity, it's a strength, it's a challenge, but it's also something that it just brings us so many different opportunities. And sometimes we just have to try and like see how it goes. If we do a blunder, then we apologize. We bring in people that can help us do better. Yeah, that's
Thank you, Shawana. Now I'll hand over to you, Simon.
Thanks very much, Jessica. And what a pleasure it is to follow you, Shawana. I mean, clearly what's going on in your patch is it's a really important example of what can happen when you do hyper local governance in a different setting. And you know, your council is unique in a whole bunch of different ways, but clearly so much of an example to the sort of things we're talking about today. Just to quickly reintroduce myself, I'm Simon Cam, policy director at an organisation called Reform, but not that one. And I wanted to, every time I introduce myself, I think it's important to emphasize that we're an independent think tank. Happy to email anyone who has any questions about that. But yeah, the name confusion is starting to become a thing. So hopefully everyone on the call gets that I'm not here with any particular political party behind me. And not that that would be a bad thing. Slightly treading on the old eggshells there. So the main thing I want to say with my 5 minutes is that I'm you know, as a sort of a think tank person, I might frustrate some of the people watching or listening because it'll pull us back one level to kind of the structural stuff that I'm very interested in. But the main thing I want to say is that I think there's a relationship between the perception of efficacy, the idea that, oh, this is an organization, this is a way of getting things done, of being able to change the environment around me and get results or fulfill the mandate. There's a relationship between the perception that that's possible through any kind of representation and people's willingness to actually volunteer, jump in, get elected, get involved. And if the general perception is either total absence of information, which I think is pretty common across different parts of England, or if the perception is that, well, these are organizations that don't have the tools, the abilities, the resources they need to make a difference in the areas that I care about, then you're always going to run into a challenge with recruitment, with bringing the right people in, with getting those diverse voices in as well. So that's I'm gonna try and elaborate on that a little bit along with some other thoughts. But that's my main. If you take away one thing from what I want to bring to this, it's that if you want a more efficacious and more diverse system, what you really need to do is give more levers, more abilities, more tools, and more resources to local councils. And that's the message we carry quite consistently through to different tiers of government, including central government. And we're going to be doing that soon in a different way as well. I'll mention that in a moment. But it seems to me a really fundamental structural barrier that you can do lots of things right, but there's a reason why we don't have incredibly diverse systems, and one of the reasons is that people aren't sure that it's worth their time. And that's a hard truth, I think, but one that people at the center of government and people in other tiers of local government need to take seriously. So in that regard, I think it's worth saying that England's a bit of a weird place. Hope that's that's not an unwelcome message. But we are a real international outlier. We do a lot of comparative analysis in our research as part of our policy work on the program that I lead called Reimagining the Local State. And honestly, the basic unit of local government representation in other countries has much smaller population footprint than ours. And when they have a hyperlocal tier of government, which is how I'd characterize community councils, parish councils, town councils, it's consistent, it's everywhere, it's not missing in some places. I think both of those are sort of areas that, again, structurally hold us back from that sense of capacity and efficacy that will make a difference to this diversity question as well. The message as well, I think, has to be that I think and I hope, but I think that this tier, that parishes, they're about to have a bit of a moment. So what's going on with the rest of local government is opening up a massive abyss, basically, at the more localized end of representation in this country. There are many parts of the country, like most of London, apart from the bit we were just hearing about, where that gap already exists and has existed for decades for all sorts of reasons. But now in parts of the country where people are used to having district councils, which are pretty much, in some places, neighborhood organizations, though they go up to pretty large scales in some parts of where they exist, those are going to go away now. The nominal average unit size for the local authority, the principal authority, is going to try and gravitate towards 500,000 people. That's a big footprint. And it's a big footprint where people want to organize hyper-local community scale activity. And I think that it's going to dawn on central government, if it hasn't already, that something consistent, something systematic needs to be put in place at that more localized level. And if they're smart, they'll learn lessons from and build upon the success stories like the one we've just been hearing about. The parts of the parish system, the town councils, parish councils, community councils that work incredibly well. But they'll have that democratic deficit in the back of their minds too. Are these legitimate organizations? Do people feel free to participate in them? Are community organizations properly represented in them and by them? Do people feel like they get their money's worth if there's a strong council tax precept in place, which is what you'll need for a more efficacious community tier? So specifically on the question of that representation and that, if you like, that plays a part in that democratic deficit, what do I think is going on? Well, we've just mentioned it, right? Geographically, the parish system isn't everywhere across the country. And many of the places where parishes are established, they're parts of the country with more homogenous populations. And I think that has a big impact on the ethnic diversity and socioeconomic diversity of the people who participate in huge swathes of hyperlocal governance. There's the reputational cultural point that I think someone has to raise at some point. So I'll be the one to put my head above the parapet and say that Vicar of Dibley is on the most cuddly and welcome side of the traditional association with the parish council, but there's other ones, some of which are less welcome and some of which I think put people off. There's the question of who among our usual population has the time to do what is essentially extremely arduous, at times important voluntary work. I know, Shawana, you were sort of reflecting on this a little bit too, but who has that time? Well, I think in large parts of the country, particularly rural parts, suburban parts, we're talking about older people, and that explains some of the demographic bias that we find in our local council system. There's that information gap that I was just talking about. People don't necessarily know what the town or the parish council is for. They don't really know what activities are possible. They don't know how they can change things or affect change through them. And I think at the core of it all, and most important for me, is this sense that if people do know about it, they are aware there's a parish on their patch. If they do have a bit of time, if they can get over the reputational gap, if they've got a bit of geography that works for them, even if all those other hurdles are taken away, there's that problem surrounding the sense of efficacy or otherwise that stops people from wanting to participate. Part of a piece of research I just completed involved talking to a number of community-led organizations. And they told me very straightforwardly that they didn't see their local parishes as a first port of call for coordinating activity or talking about next steps or getting things done locally at the neighborhood scale. And they didn't see it as an interesting opportunity or potential for them to participate directly. It just wasn't worth their time to engage with the parish or the town council on their patch, rather than circumventing it and going either to the local authority or even trying to bid into funding from central government. That's a huge problem. And it's a one that's contingent on the way that we have, I think, sleepwalked into a system that isn't sort of structurally rational, doesn't work the way that in fact it ought to across most of England. So how do we fix that? How do we make a bit of a difference to that? Because this matters. There's a virtuous cycle that you can achieve here. If people feel that they are adequately represented at that hyperlocal scale, they'll participate more. And if they participate more, the representation will improve, and so on. And it'll also help with outcomes. There's loads of evidence to suggest that cognitive diversity, viewpoint diversity, and other kinds of diversity improve the decisions that emanate from different scales of government. So getting it right is really crucial too. It makes it important to try and fix this. Now, I think we can learn a lot from, for example, Shawana's example. I think we can learn a lot from lots of really successful pockets and corners of the parish system across England. But if I was to wave a magic wand and imagine up the new system that I think could really help us to get over some of the challenges I've just described, it would be one where by default, the town or parish council is in a position to draw down more powers. It would have more access to different kinds of revenue streams by default, emanating from central government, but also from local revenue sources. And therefore, it would create incentives for people to participate no matter their background. People would feel that they don't waste their time by getting involved in those activities. That's a challenge. That's not how the system currently works. And it's something that we want to advocate for. In fact, we have a report that we're planning to bring out next week that sets out some of the parameters for that. And one thing we think could start happening in places that are already parished is that smaller town and parish councils could club together, coordinate their activities more effectively, pool resources more effectively to get that efficacy. And we think that we should make it 100 times easier, simpler, and more directly enabled by local government to set up new community councils in urban areas. It shouldn't be an uphill struggle. It should be facilitated and supported and properly resourced. So that's what we're going to put forward. But for me, you have to answer those deep structural questions in order to tick all the boxes and take away those obstacles and get that diversity picture right. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Simon. Now over to you, Tamsin. I'm afraid you're on mute, Tamsin. I'm really sorry, I'm not hearing anything. Apologies, everyone. Please just bear with us one moment. We'll try and get the sound working here.
Is that better?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Just had to, I wasn't muted, it had chosen the wrong audio source, so sorry for that. Right, so what I was saying was really hard acts to follow and really, really interesting to hear both from Shawana and Simon on that. So hi everybody, I'm really delighted to be here. My name's Tamsin Hewitt. I work for the Local Government Association in the leadership team. I don't know, there may be some people here who recall me from about 12 years ago when I used to work for NAUC as well. So I kind of know both sectors quite well. I am here really just to talk a little bit about what we do at the LGA to encourage people to come forward for election as local councillors. We have a campaign called Be a Councillor. So I've got some slides, hopefully not death by PowerPoint. I'm going to share those with you now, just because they show, I think one of the things that we do is we use imagery quite effectively to try and sort of put forward that view of diversity and view of representation. You could, if you see somebody like you could do something. So I'm going to share some slides shortly. So hopefully, I'll do this now. We go into slideshow. Everybody should be able to see it. I'm going to have to rely upon my fellow panelists to tell me if it's working. now I can see that as well. So hopefully everybody can see those slides. So yeah, our campaign is called Be a Councillor. It is pretty much what it says. It's sort of, you know, does what it says on the tin. And that's, I guess, the equivalent of the NALC Make a Change campaign. And we do work with NALC and together on some things like, for example, this event, but also around events, because we recognise that a lot of people either make the start of their political journey at town, parish and community level and then become a district or county or borough councillor, or some people just kind of do both at the same time. I think a little bit like Shawana was saying, you want to get the busy people, you want to get the people who are already involved and engaged, because they're more likely to first of all have something that they want to do, but secondly to you know, be in the system. We also do reach out to the general public as well, but we do work together with NALC on things. So the Be a Councillor campaign really is, so can everybody still see the slide? Sorry, because I've just moved away from myself. Great. So we believe really firmly in increasing the pool of talent, and we think it's a key challenge for local government, as the other speakers have already mentioned. It's really important that councils at all levels reflect the communities they serve, and that there's diversity of experience, and crucially, I think, lived experience around the decision-making table. Councils make such, particularly at the principal authority level, make decisions that have huge impacts on people's lives, and in the town, parish and community council level, things that can really impact upon people. So having people who have lived experience around, for example, what it's like to use a wheelchair when you're thinking about access to the town hall, these things are really key. So we really believe in that. And we recognise that there are barriers to engagement for some people in getting involved. So in 2021, we partnered with the Young Foundation to do some research around what those barriers were. And one of the things we found was that, first of all, people didn't see themselves in the role. So that was something, they didn't see people like them doing it. But also, sometimes people felt like they didn't really know what the role was. I think I'm mirroring some of what the other speakers have said. They didn't really understand it. They didn't really know what was going on, what they needed to do to become a councillor, what being a councillor meant. And people told us that what they wanted was to hear from people doing the role. They wanted to hear from councillors about what it was like for them, why they valued it, what they got out of it. And they wanted to hear and see councillors like them in those roles. So that's one of the focuses of our campaign, is to get the message out there. So we do that. Just going to check that's the slide.
Sorry, Tamsin, could I just come in there? Could you please put your presentation back in presenter mode so we can see the slides in full screen?
I do apologise. There we go.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. So we have 4 strands for doing that, the way we work. And what you can see here on this screen is some of the imagery that we use, and some of the kind of different formats that we use it in with our different types of publication that we do. But we have 4 main strands that we work with Be a Councillor. We have a kind of national public awareness raising campaign. We also work directly with councils to deliver local events. We also work through our political group offices, and then finally we work with key partners who are community civic organisations who are working in communities that we've identified we want to reach. So I'm going to quickly talk about each of those 4 strands, just to give an overview of the sorts of things that we do. Some of these things will be relevant in terms of they are accessible to town and parish councils as well. So people, you can kind of look at them, direct people there if they're interested. And some of them will be more relevant about things that are happening to look out for, or who to get in touch with if you're kind of interested in linking up with a local council campaign. So the first thing that we do is public awareness raising. So we have a Be a Councillor website, which I'm hoping I'm going to be able to put into the chat. So I've put that's the events page for Be a Councillor, but you can navigate from that to various other bits of the website as well if you want to. And on that website, we have case studies. So we have different stories from councillors talking about their experience. We've got a diverse range of councillors. And we find having something like that, so that's something I think that is relatively easily replicable, particularly at a local level. Just having some people talking about why they do it, what they get from it, what it means to them. And I have seen, I think it was in Dorset, the county association did some brilliant videos that were exactly that, that were people kind of standing in on the high street, talking about why they were a town or parish councillor. And I think it at any level, something like that, where it's that kind of, this is why I do it, really seems to resonate with the general public. We also have other types of resources. So for example, we've recently released an employer-employee guide. So that's a two-part guide. It's both for people in employment, but also for their employers, explaining the benefits of being a counsellor and also explaining to people what their rights are in relation to taking time off work for civic duties. So that's a resource that we've recently worked on and sort of publicised, and that would also be available for use by the general public and by any employer. We've also produced a guide for disabled people, so that's specifically aimed at breaking down the barriers to elected office. That's available in an easy read version as well, and we worked in co-production on that with people with lived experience of disability. So that talks about things like what sort of adjustments you might be able to request, and what kind of support is out there, what the implications are for benefits, that kind of thing. So our website has loads of resources on it and lots of information. We also keep that updated with an events page that talks about the events that we're doing with other partners. We also do social media. So you can see on this slide, we've got some examples of our social media assets with different councillors from different places out in the community doing things. We do sometimes do some paid social media. So we'll kind of pay to have that promoted, but we also do organic social media as well. We are this year for the first time going to be reaching out into radio advertising. So they're going to have a radio advert encouraging people to take a look at the website. We're going to see whether that, how that works. We've been advised that radio is quite a cost-effective way of getting the message out there. And then finally, we do events like this, like the Democracy in Action event with sector partners. We also work with other partners across our sector to try and encourage people to come forward. So now I'm not able to move on. Sure. There we go. So the second strand is support for councils. So this support is really bespoke. It's handled by my colleagues Virginia and Poonam. And when a council wants to get support for events that they're running, we will normally have a conversation with them about what their needs are, maybe a year to 18 months out from the elections that they're targeting, and put together a kind of communications program and a program of events with them. I guess the key learning from that is, and we also provide them with resources to do that. The key learning from that, I think that will be helpful for people on this call, is that it is an ongoing and lengthy process. I mean, I think Shawanna's example was really useful for kind of like how long and how much resource you can put into that to get a really good outcome. I think one of the things that can happen across different levels of council is it's only when the elections are really about to happen that everybody thinks, oh no, do we have anybody? And actually our learning is this needs to be something that everybody's thinking about all the time, and that actually is a more coordinated and ongoing process. So the other thing that we found that can be really helpful, you can put on events sort of where you invite people to come along if they're interested. So like information sharing events, breaking it down with councillors speaking about what their experience is, but also going to where people are. So we've done support for councils, which has involved going to county fairs, for example, going out to kind of events that are already happening and having a little stall and just having a couple of councillors there to speak to people and kind of say, this is why I do it, this is why you should get involved. So kind of going out where something's already happening, meeting people where they are, can be quite useful. We also offer at the LDO, we offer a member peer system. So that's where people can we pair up existing councillors with councillors in other authorities where they've run a good campaign, and they support each other through that. So that's a sort of option, another option that we offer. So trying to support that learning across the sector, learning from other places. So again, I think if I were on this call as somebody looking to get a more diverse set, I would be on the email to Shawanna pretty quickly saying, can you give us some advice? It's just that kind of sharing process, I think, that's really helpful. The other thing that we do, and this is, I guess, a very distinct thing about the LGA that's not relevant, as relevant for now, but because we are a politically led organisation, we also work through our political group offices, and they offer their own programmes of events and bespoke support that are aimed at their, you can see here, I put the branding up there, so they're branded in their party colours, and they do that to people who are already involved in a party political system. So there are 4 groups, are the 3 main parties and then everybody else, and they're all in the independent group. There's a very strict ratio that dictates whether or not you get your own group. So it's done through the number of councillors that people have. So that could change, but at the moment, and that's it. So the parties, the Green Party, for example, and other parties, other smaller parties like the Climate Party or Reform or any of the other parties, they will be within the independent group, along with true independent councillors, residents associations, and that sort of thing. So obviously it's slightly different when they offer it, but they do offer, the Greens have their own programme, and then the independent network have their own programme as well. So that's something that we do uniquely. We find a lot of the work that we do, we work both in a cross-party way, but also within the political traditions, because when somebody is already involved, of course, as a sort of member of a party, then they're more likely in a political system to put themselves forward. They're already engaged. So that's something that we do as part of our programme. And then finally, we also, as I said, engage with sector partners. So we run this as a procurement, because obviously with the money that we're sharing to do this kind of work is coming from government, and we have to spend it appropriately. But we reach out and partner outside of that as well with people who are working in this space. So for this year, the 2025 campaign that's being delivered by partners, these are the organisations. They're working in a coalition. So they came together in advance and kind of put together a programme, and we're working with them. So these are some examples of the events, and the link that I put in the chat also has has all of the events that we're running up until the middle of this year, and there will be some further events coming later on as well, that when people have signed up, we will be sharing. So these events are open to anybody who is kind of would identify with the target audiences. As you can see there, we're targeting so Elector and 50/50 work with women, Operation Black Vote work with Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, racially minoritized groups. The Migrant Democracy Project work with first generation migrants. The Disability Policy Centre working with disabled people, and the Politics Project are working with young people. So those are some of the core groups that we've identified as underrepresented in local government. And so they're holding information sessions. Sometimes they'll offer one-to-one support as mentoring. Most of these organisations also have their own programmes outside of the work they're doing with us. So it's about coming together and sort of everything working and supporting. And many of these organisations I know have worked with NALC in the past as well. So I think these events, if you are looking to encourage people to kind of dip their toes into the water of kind of a I say political, small p political, kind of becoming a councillor, these events will support people whatever level that they're looking to come at, and are a really useful resource. So something that certainly you can share or direct people to if they just want to find out more and want to connect with a community. I think before I kind of finish up, so I will stop sharing because they don't need slides up to say this. One of the things that we found from our research and experience is that a lot of times when people are coming from backgrounds that are not traditionally represented in kind of any level of government, what they need is to feel part of the community, not to feel like the odd person out, but also to be asked. And often they need to be asked more than once. So, you know, asked sometimes. Some people I know have gone on to very successful political careers, have been asked 5-6 times before they've gone for election for the first time. So I think if you're in a position where you're trying to get your own area more diverse, don't take no for an initial answer in a polite and appropriate way, but keep asking and keep sort of like explaining why you think somebody will be good. That's something that we found really, really powerful. And also think about creating those networks, because sometimes it's easy for somebody to be plucked out and put in the spotlight and then feel like they're on their own. So it's about kind of like that ongoing support for people. We find that tapping into these networks with partners is really useful for providing. So a quick, hopefully useful overview of the Be a Councillor campaign. Very happy to answer any questions as well.
Many thanks, Tamsin. So I'll now pick questions from the Q&A box for our panelists. So please do continue putting your questions in there and we will try and get through as many as possible. I will start with, I think we've got a couple for you, Shawana. First of all, someone asking, how many councillor spaces are there at Queen's Park Community Council and how many staff do you have?
We have 12 councillors and 2 full-time staff members.
Perfect, thank you. And the next question was about how you enable and partner with active community organisations. How do you make the step to engage their members, the members of these community organisations as council members? And what are the added benefits to them of becoming a councillor?
So I think in terms of our initial communication, we just say, can we come and meet you to learn what you do as an organisation? So we do that kind of like initial connection. We just go along, I go along, or I send some of our councillors along to their events just so that they can be in and around the community and kind of build those relationships. I think if we are working with someone collaboratively and we think, well, me personally, I would say, if I'm working with someone and I think that they would be a good counsellor, I would just say there's co-option coming up. This is what it means to be co-opted, explain the process to them and kind of encourage them in terms of taking part, and very similarly with elections. I mean, I think one of my, and I agree definitely with Tasmin in terms of asking multiple times. We have one of our councillors now who, before the last election, just ran Play Street. I asked, do you want to be a councillor? The elections are coming up. She said, no, I think it's too much. And I think I asked her probably about 5 times. And then in the end, she agreed. And now she's like one of our star councillors. She's won Councillor of the Year in our council since the last election. So it's really just kind of like making that personal relationship with the organisation, looking out for people who are active, who are committed, who come to you with like ideas, who you see are pursuing things, and just trying to get them involved. Say, come down to the council meeting, come and join this working group, and also just kind of like helping them with the things that they need. So we've helped people to kind of set up community interest organizations, develop like governance structures for their organizations. So just kind of positioning ourselves as the helper to get things done. And after a while, people kind of start to come to us. I'm not sure if I answered all aspects of that question.
No, that was really helpful, thank you. I think I did see a question pop up about what your precept is. Do you mind letting us know?
No. Our precept at the moment is, I think, £197,000, something to that nature. Yeah.
And what percentage increase do you do for the next financial year, if you know that? Don't worry if you don't.
We won't be increasing our precept in the next financial year. We increased it the previous financial year to, I think it was 5%. So at this point it's around £54 a year for eligible households.
Great, thank you. Now a couple of questions, I think, for Tamsin here. So firstly, do you make your campaign's media content available as a pack that can be downloaded for use, or is this just for LGA members?
So I think it is something that we make available to LGA members. What I will say is that obviously NALC is a corporate member of the LGA. So on a kind of I think we all share the same mission. We do have to be a little bit careful about just the brand control, if that makes sense. So that's just something we have to think about. But if somebody is interested in, if you're interested in using it, you're welcome to contact me or contact Chris or Jessica at NALC. Then they can contact me and we can talk about what we can do. So we don't generally make it available for download, but we would be open to sharing it if helpful. But just making sure that one of the things we have, because it's grant funded, there are certain kind of a brand and UK government funded kind of branding we have to use and things like that. So it's just that would be the only kind of caveat.
Great. And a related question, do you charge for this support for councils, or is it part of the membership fee?
Yeah, we don't charge councils for the support, no. So in general, most of the support that we offer is part of the LGA membership. Yeah. So again, I think we would, if there were a kind of council that wanted to get the sort of support that we offer, that was an out, a kind of town parish at that level, I think it would be going through now to kind of talk about what could be offered for that. But it is part of the membership offer that we make to councils.
Great, thank you. Now we have a question about how to persuade established councillors to accept the idea that diversity is a good thing. How do you do that? The question goes on to say, all of the effort and time and resources is meaningless. When it comes to co-option, they always select people from the same background and with the same experience. Does anyone want to come in there? Simon?
I'll have a go, and I imagine that both Tamsin and Shawana will have a very practical view on this, but I think this illustrates the point that diversity begets further diversity of experience, that in fact the kind of network effect of having even one or two councillors from a different kind of background, a different socioeconomic background, different ethnic experience, whatever it is, can have that kind of ripple effect of, first of all, qualifying the idea of participating in that way to other kinds of people, but also having that direct association potentially. It's a recruitment asset further down the line. The implication being from this question that you get the kind of the dark version of that. If all of your people look the same, then all the people they know who they might tap on the shoulder will probably, just by the way that society works, they might find that there's a little bit of homogeneity there as well. That's pretty high risk. But I would like to add that my experience, and in the last few months, I've been talking to really quite a lot of parish councillors, town councillors. At least the ones I've been talking to, don't really need to be persuaded on this. They see it as a challenge. They want their part of the system to be highly representative of all of the diversity across the country, and they're crying out for the kinds of tools that Tamsin's talking about and the kinds of practical measures that Shawana's been putting in place. And the thing for me that'll really shift the dial is simply having the presence of these organizations in a greater diversity of places where different kinds of people live, and will, just by the law of numbers, start getting involved in a different way as well.
Thank you, Simon. Shawana or Tamsin, did you want to come in there?
I think just similar to Simon, I found that our councillors have just generally wanted more diversity. I think the history of our council really came out of a very diverse group of people just being tired with the status quo and wanting something new. And so I think that legacy has been carried forth. But I think in terms of just generally where I feel like council is potentially going to have a difficult decision, or whether there's going to be kind of massive diversions in the way of thinking, I try to have conversations before the meeting just to kind of hear what the concerns of the councillors are, and kind of like share a perspective that might help to shift theirs. And I think that might be useful in terms of co-option if they are concerned about, I don't know, whether this diversity will have an adverse impact. I would try to kind of like have those conversations and give them some guidance. But then ultimately you can't really change the decision that they make.
Yeah, I think this is really difficult. I think particularly when you have somewhere which, I mean, what we're talking about here really is a democratic deficit as well, because actually the the situation has arisen, but also there haven't been elections, and so if I think it depends where you're coming at this from. So I suppose there was somebody who said they had a lot of people come forward, but they chose the person who looked like them. And I think when you work in the kind of diversity space, that's a very common thing. People choose people like them. That's a sort of, that often happens. And you can do the groundwork. Somebody said about, you can kind of try and have some training or support around why that might be happening and how they might be able to challenge themselves, their thinking on that internally, if they're willing to do that. But maybe the work, I would suggest that the work to get those people forward needs to happen earlier, so that then there's enough people coming forward, so then you have an election, and then it can be the electorate who choose rather than the people in the room, because it is, and there will be lots of people who will be motivated and who want to increase diversity, but the reality is there will also be people who won't be motivated to do that. That's kind of that's the fact of life. So, like, sometimes people won't be motivated, so you can either try and change their motivation, or I guess you can kind of look at it, well, let's actually make the decision by someone else, as it should be. Ideally it would be made by the electorate. The other thing from a practical point of view I'd suggest is talking to your democratic services team at the principal authority and seeing if there's any support that they can offer in terms of trying to publicise sort of elections and get people forward at that point to kind of stand. So because where something's contested, obviously then if you have a diverse group of people there, and you're more likely to get somebody from that. I think it is a difficult thing when you have a small group of people making decisions. You get the kind of we call it kind of groupthink. It's, I'm sure people have heard that before, that it can just be something that's happened. Nobody is meaning to have that. No one is necessarily a bad actor in that situation. It just is a tendency of groups to kind of coalesce around something that's similar. So I think it can be about either challenging that way, depending upon where you are, whether you're a councillor or a clerk, you'll have more or less opportunity to do that, and also then seeking to increase the number of people coming forward and maybe have actual elections rather than co-options if you feel that that's an issue in your particular local area.
Thank you, Tamsin. Now I'll move on to the next question. I mean, this is kind of more a statement, I think, from someone saying they're a small council. They've got 7 councillors, part-time clerk, population of 500, 50% are over 55s, mainly white British. They've got a precept of 12.5k, managed to get 80k in grant funding over the last year. And Simon, as you said, if people feel they're adequately represented, they will want to get involved. But unfortunately, in this case, it's the opposite. They have a regular newsletter, website, and social media. They're still struggling to find councillors. Do you have anything to add there? Yeah.
No, look, I hear the problem there. That's a tough challenge, because it sounds like you're doing everything right. You're doing good work. You're active. But I think there's a fundamental thing here, and it's perhaps it speaks to something that came out in the chat a little while ago as well, which is this idea that maybe the basic scale of operation is a challenge here too. So one of the things I said was that I think a sense of efficacy is going to be important to your recruitment efforts. That's going to be difficult to convince people when your population footprint is that small. So I think there's something here about, as someone in the chat put, the clubbing together or even the merging of parishes that allows that larger footprint, the potential for a more capacity arising from a larger tax base, the ability to demonstrate through new systems, I hope, that you can draw down new responsibilities and operate things in a different way. That will help. And in a very brute sense, statistical, logistical sense, you'll be fishing in a bigger pond. Having that few people as your potential pool of volunteers or councillors, that's always going to be an uphill struggle. So I would argue that you need that larger footprint sometimes in order just to have a little bit of freshness and availability there too. So there's lots of reasons to do it. And the point that was made in the chat, I think, is absolutely right. That none of these associations or connections will make the blindest bit of difference unless they're properly recognised, properly resourced, and that's something that needs to emanate from somewhere else.
Shawana, did you want to come in there?
Thank you. I think sometimes when there is a well-oiled machine where everything seems to be going just fine and dandy, I don't think people feel like their involvement is necessary because everything's already happening well enough, and they're happy with it. So I think potentially that might be, then it becomes a challenge because people don't feel that their involvement is necessary. So I think to kind of deal with that, I think potentially has to think about ways that you can stretch beyond what your council is currently doing, in terms of meeting needs that people, trying to understand like needs that people aren't bringing to the council or where they don't necessarily think the council can sit, and where, but it can, like in theory it can sit there if it works creatively, if it innovates a little bit. So I think it's really kind of like trying to reposition the council to meet new needs that the community don't necessarily think that it can meet, or that it does, that it's the purpose of it to meet. And I think then you can start to kind of identify people who might be able to help you go into that other direction.
Pansy?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to agree with what everyone has said. Also, just to say, I think if you have a small population, which is mainly white British and over half are over 55, then what's representative for you looks different from what's representative in other places. And we mustn't get hung up on this idea of, you know, obviously it's good to have diversity of like neurodiversity, like all kind of cognitive diversity, sorry, as Simon was talking about, and kind of make sure you're not excluding people. But it is important to recognise representation will look different in different places, particularly at this hyper local level. And one thing I was just going to say in terms of encouraging people to go through, one of the things I think can be really interesting is, particularly if you're operating with a small electorate, you could actually really work to find out what it is that's putting people off. You could put out 500 leaflets saying, if you wouldn't consider being a councillor, why? Tell us why. What are the barriers for you? You might find out something that it might be exactly what you thought, but you might find out some stuff you haven't taken into account. It might be the timing of meetings, it might be the frequency of meetings, it might be, you know, people have all sorts of different responsibilities in their lives that they're trying to juggle. So it might just be that inadvertently with a sort of population like that, there's something happening at a time when meetings are happening and we just weren't aware, stuff like that. So I think just actually finding out from people what it is, if that's, and you may already have done that, so apologies if you have, but I think sometimes it's those barriers we're not aware of because we're sitting in our space and it's not always obvious how it looks to somebody else. Can be a really powerful way of addressing some of those things.
Thank you. Now I think this would be a question for starting with yourself, Shawana. Do you use any social media channels to reach different residents groups, and if so, which ones?
Yeah, I think we use all of the major social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we use them differently from our social media strategy. I think with Twitter, it's mainly our kind of organization and groups that we communicate with through Twitter, and then Facebook for our middle to older age residents, and then Instagram, lots of like images and stuff for families and younger residents. We're trying to get into the next door space a little bit more, but it isn't a focus for us at the moment. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another question, do you for yourself, sorry, Tamsin, did you want to join in there? Apologies.
If I might just to say, we found that we get the most engagement, or a lot of engagement, to social media on LinkedIn, because it's a job opportunity and it's not the one you think, you know, it's not the one you think of, but we get a lot of engagement on LinkedIn, so just worth a thought.
Thank you. Apologies there. Shawana, I don't know if you've ever had any experience of having someone join the council for probationary period before being co-opted at Queen's Park.
No, we've not had that experience
Okay,
before.
thank you. I will move on to the next question then. I think you partly answered this, Shawana. What's the best channel to aim at the younger demographic? You know, how did you get your 29-year-old councillor on board, for example?
So our 29-year-old councillor actually came on during lockdown. She wanted to kind of bring the community together in terms of socially distance, but together. And so she brought an idea to the council, which it funded at that time. And then after, she came on as a project worker for a couple of months. And so she kind of just came to us and we didn't find her. But we have a youth council in our area that has a youth club in our area that has its own youth council. So we work quite closely with them. We do drop-ins at the youth club. We do drop-ins and so we kind of like engage with the young people and their parents. I think what we found is that as much as we are on the social media sphere, we're not necessarily tapping into the younger kind of like the 18 to maybe 30 demographic through that space unless they're family people. And so we tend to go to the colleges, go to the youth club and chat to them there.
Great, thank you. I don't know if Tamsin, you wanted to come in there at all from your experience with the Be a Councillor campaign?
Yeah, I think it is difficult. It is a difficult one. So I think interestingly, with LinkedIn, you do get younger people do use that quite extensively for job opportunities. And I think one of the things about making that case of if you're looking to move into a leadership role at some point in your career, becoming a councillor, getting involved in local politics is a really good way of bolstering your CV. So making that quite specific pitch. The other thing is one of the partners we work with, the Politics Project, they have something called the Democracy Classroom, and they have a lot of online kind of resources for people looking to engage younger people in the kind of like public sphere. So definitely worth checking them out for that support.
Thank you. Don't know, Simon, you've got anything you want to add on to that? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So this is from someone who is in a rural parish with lots of new houses. They're struggling to break down barriers between 4 different settlements: farmers, urban incomers, and original residents who feel squeezed out. And this person says they found it interesting to see how barriers are overcome, but any other advice would be welcome in terms of attracting people to the council. They've got 11 councillors and a precept of 20k at the moment. Anyone want to come in there with any kind of additional advice? Simon?
So one thing that I think happens quite a lot in other contexts is that the challenge of representation in an increasingly complex environment, and let's say, Shawana's coming to us from, a much more kind of dynamic population base where there are lots of different interests that rub up against each other. That's just to be expected in a more urban context. So if that's true of your council, I think there's probably a way of shifting it so that the representation ask is about making sure that your special interests, that the things you care about for the local area are properly represented in local decision making, as opposed to, oh well, people like me, I'm going to be there. We're only going to get one kind of person there. It's on. You know what? This place is going to have to change, or there are changes on the way. We need to make sure that the full spread of local opinion is involved, and I think that's the mentality you'd find, for example, in France, very consistently with their very small communes as a structure of local government as well. Is that, oh no, we have to participate in this, even though this is quite a complex area, because it's a complex area.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if Tamsin, you want to come in there?
I think just to add to what Simon's saying on the this is a bit more conceptual, I suppose, but one of the principles that we kind of try and employ when we're working with underrepresented groups is the idea of co-production. So working in co-production with people. So you're not just doing things to them, but you're actually putting their lived experience and what they want at the heart of the decision that's being made. So you can apply that. It's obviously a kind of concept you can apply across any sphere of work that you're doing. And I think that it's really important in where you've got those competing interests, bringing people together, maybe with some kind of engagement. There's lots of different sort of engagement tools that you can use that aren't just a meeting where people sit and listen to someone else. You can use different ways of engaging with people so that their voices are in that mix. And I think that having that's almost a change of mindset for an organisation to work in that way, and that then leads to people being actually able to engage with more complex ideas with other people's needs, more effectively. Yeah, I mean, as I say, it's a little bit more conceptual, and there are if anyone wants to Google some of the methods that I've used and found really useful, something called the World Cafe. That's a really brilliant way of doing community kind of engagement. And you might find that there are organisations in your area that are doing that kind of engagement anyway. And you might be able to kind of partner with them to do something that kind of, it's a way of bringing people around. And one of the really important things about it is when you go out to people to ask them to help you make decisions, you give them something. So it's what's in it for them. Why is somebody going to come and give up their Tuesday evening on a wet kind of like Tuesday in November to come and participate in something? What's in it for them? What they're getting back? That might be, a tasty tea, but it might also be something more. Hopefully, at the end of it, something more important. They can see what their, what their impact their engagement has made. But it's really important to have that idea of like, what when you go out to people, what are they actually going to get from engaging in that process?
Thank you. One very last quick question, Shawana, before we wrap up. Does your council have a social media policy? And if so, are you able to share it either in the chat, or we can send it out after the event?
Yeah, we do have a social media policy, and I am happy to share it I'll send it to you.
Perfect. Okay, and we'll send that out after the event with the event slides from today. So to sum up, please could I ask all of you to provide one thing that our parish and town councils can do now to help improve diversity on their local councils, starting with Shawana. If you could just provide one thing.
I think being repetitive, I think start with mapping who are the key persons, organisation groups in the community, who's missing from the table, find out where they are and go there and bring them into the fold.
Thank you. Tamsin?
I think a little harder for me to answer, because there might be advice that I would give as a person that isn't necessarily LGA advice. So from the LGA perspective, I'd say please take a look at our events that are happening and think about if there are people in your community you could persuade to go along to them. And from a personal perspective, I think I very much agree with what Shawana is saying, like do that mapping, see who's not at the table. There is one, sorry, I'm doing three now. Well, three, it's also a rhetorical device. My third is get in touch with, if you haven't already, if you're not in touch with your democratic services team at your principal authority who manage the elections, do build those relationships with them and see what support they can provide. And, it would be entirely possible for them to do a bid, for example, for a Be a Councillor campaign, working with you and other parishes, and do a coordinated Be a Councillor, Make a Change campaign across the local area. That's totally something that we can facilitate and support along with NALC. So if you want to start thinking about 2026 now, to really get that in place, I think that would be a really strong action that you could take.
Thank you. And Simon?
Let me just pick up what Tamsin said a couple of questions ago. There's a world of different participatory approaches out there. They're not that hard to acquire. Some of it is really just about being prepared to have a blank sheet of paper sort of conversation with a part of the community that you don't usually knock on the door of. Getting room in your agenda, having the willingness to have open conversations could lead to all kinds of interesting outcomes, including new opportunities, new findings of people who would be fantastic councillors, community councillors, parish councillors, who might become real resource and asset And the thing I'd add for myself, which is not so practical, but I think the moment is coming or has come, start getting ready to advocate loudly for a bigger seat at the table for hyperlocal, for parish and town councils. Because I do think that gap is being noticed by central government. And if we all ask for a change, that change might come.
Thank you. So huge thank you to all our fantastic speakers today, Shawana, Simon and Tamsin, for their valuable and insightful contributions. Please do fill out the feedback form when it appears on your screen. Our post-event mailing will go to all attendees and will include the chat and the presentations you saw today. Now I'd like to say a huge thank you again to our partners, Clear Councils Insurance, CCLA, and Bless Share Elimination for their support for today's online event. And don't forget to check out our brilliant online events programme for events coming up through the spring. Thank you for joining today. Goodbye.